What's good with it in the hood with it? Welcome back to the Collective Clips where you already know. Tas, tas, tas. We get it in. But before we get it in, let's hit that like and subscribe button. And even before that, let's get to this intro. Welcome back to the Collective Clips. Make sure that you hit that like and subscribe button and put your notification bell on all. So that way you're directed in the direction of the dope content that the gun is kicking. I'm very humbled for all the support. Let's get this channel to 100K ASAP. Let's put an ASAP Alapagus on it. Facts, right? So I wanted to talk about two groups, the Nueva Flores and the Fresno Bulldogs, Fresnal, right? Old school 209 F-14 Bulldogs. I know they're not that anymore, but that's what I remember them as. So that's what I'm going to run with. You know, the New Flowers are a group, and there's a lot of misconceptions on the New Flowers. And I'm going to talk about the ties between the New Flowers and the Bulldogs on certain yards in the California Department of Corrections. How these two groups have became very similar in their mannerisms, the way they conduct themselves, and what they do while on them said prison yards. And it's not out of choice. Most of the time it's out of necessity, or not even so necessity. It's just, hey, an enemy of an enemy is a friend of mine, right? And because these two groups go at it with common enemies, why not come together like some butt cheeks and fart all over everybody on that yard? Now, the New Flowers were a group that when they first were formed, a lot of people believed that they were a dropout gang, that they were formed out of pulling away from the Norteños and doing their own thing because they were forced. Now, the New Flowers had different idealisms than the big homies for the North, right? And it's happened before. The similarity goes back far with the Bulldogs. Bulldogs having done the same exact thing. Bulldogs once being F-14ers, Fresnal Norteños, Bulldogs second, Northerners first, and functioning under one of the big four, had decided in the past that their group was bigger, that they were tired of being oppressed. There's a lot of different stories in the history. Some guys from Fresno are going to tell you they were being oppressed, they were being picked on, they were being utilized within the Northern cause, and that there was a big bias from the city of San Jose, city of Salas, Gilas, all that area against them. So they did what only real gangsters would do and struck out on their own. Now, I choose to believe the history like this. There were certain individuals from Fresno that thought they were bigger than the bigger picture. And because they had sway, because they had power within their people, they very clandestine started to get at their people with huilas and push the Bulldog narrative over the Norte narrative, and somehow were able to influence the younger generation like, hey, we don't need the Norte anymore. We are Central. We can do whatever we want and however we want to do it. And they did it. You know, I play a little bit of a part into that history. Not that I had anything to do with the division between Bulldogs and Norteños. Hey, that right there that hurt my heart. I hurt a lot of Norteños' heart. I hurt a lot of Bulldogs' heart because all we knew was the canalismo and the so rough, so tough, and it was a dog-eat-dog world. It was a Norteño world. So we were all together. See, people don't understand that when the Bulldogs left the Norteño movement, it hurt a lot of people. It caused a lot of chaos. There was a lot of friction, a lot of drama. I was stabbed. You know, I was in several altercations in Preston in the youth authority. I was in YA at the time, 1992, when the Bulldogs decided to shoot huilas to all the Northerners saying that they were no longer Norteños. It was similar to what the Hoovers did with the Crips, right? They said, hey, we're not going to function as Norteños. In fact, in direct opposite, we ain't got no beef with the Southsiders like you do, which kind of fucking blew our minds. The mentality was blown because we were like, damn, you were once a Norteño yesterday. Today, you know, you're getting cover-ups on your 14s. There was Bulldogs back in the days with XIVs, X4s, 14s, all that. They were getting them covered with dog paws, Bulldogs. And it just became a mortal enemy to the Norteño movement, right? And it was a mortal enemy because it was like these were once homies and they felt that it was a cowardice act that they turned their back. That was coming from the northern side. These guys are cowards. They abandoned the ship. It's an abandonment. They left the homies hanging. Where at the same time, the Bulldogs were like, hey, we're tired of being utilized. We're tired of dealing with, you know, the North that caused first. They were all about Fresno, all about the Bulldogs, and they ran with that. So in any case, man, they decided to do their own thing, and they have been able to survive throughout decades of violence, decades of going at it with Norteños and Southsiders. Now, immediately when it happened, a lot of people won't tell you this. I remember there was Bulldogs that I functioned with, like I was cool with. They were homies, right? And I remember going from one institution to another in the youth authority. And I already knew what time it was. I went from Nellis to Preston. It was on and cracking with the dogs, like on and cracking. That was our main rivals right there. We weren't even tripping off Southerners. They weren't tripping off us. Everybody was tripping with the dogs. Then I end up in Carl Holton, and the Bulldogs were actually kicking it with the Southsiders there. They were actually cool. And I remember one Bulldog in particular, I'm not going to say his name. He's from the north side, though he was a homie. And I mean, me and this dude were ace deuces. This was my taita. He was my boy. We were Sellies and Nellis, all that. We're in the pissers at the latrine, right? The bathroom area. And I see him. He had just came, and I'm like, what's up, hum? Right? Like fuck all the bullshit, the gang bullshit aside. Like, you were my boy. You know what I'm saying? You know stories about my family. I know stories about your family. Like, how you doing, bro? You know what I mean? Are you good? Devato wouldn't even look at me. Buster. I remember fucking he's thinking in his mind. I could feel it, right? And the tension was real. So needless to say, the Bulldog Norteño fucking thing, separation continued in certain compas. There were certain compas where Bulldogs were still cool with Northerners. It was, look, it just depended on the area and the yard you went to. You go on one yard, there were still Bulldogs that wouldn't let it go. They still fucking kicked it with Norteños and the homies because they felt that pull right there. Then there were some, they fucking hated Northerners for whatever reason and because of the drama, you know? So that's how it was. Anyways, the Bulldogs have been segregated and separated on prison yards in the California Department of Corrections for decades now. Okay? That doesn't mean they're not on yards where Norteños and Southsiders are housed. And that doesn't mean sometimes they don't run into each other and there's conflict, because there definitely is. Anytime a Bulldog is seen on a yard, he's going to get ran up on by North and South, because there is basically what you call a luz verde, you know, there's a green light. And so it's going to be a thing that's going to happen. That doesn't mean the Bulldogs are getting fucking smashed everywhere they go, because sometimes them knowing wherever they go, it's on and cracking. They already got the heads up because they know they're going there. See, the North and South doesn't know who pulls up till they pull up. The Bulldogs know where they're pulling up to. So all they got to do is stay low, incognito, play the role, get to R&R and handle their fucking business. So there's a lot of situations where people are like, oh, the Bulldogs got rushed. They got rushed. But there's a lot of times the Bulldogs got off too. Just nobody wants to speak on that. That's the truth. So the Bulldogs have been maintaining. And there's a lot of dudes that, well, of course they can maintain. They're on yards all together alone. But there are certain yards in the California system where they're actually with the group known as Nueva Flor. Now, Nueva Flores are basically a mirror image of the Bulldogs. You know, the NF in Nueva Flores had meaning behind it. There was a lot of dudes in the beginning. The founders of the Nueva Flor were part of a prison organization, okay? They decided that the idealisms and the benefits of being from that cause just wasn't working out in their favor, so they separated themselves. Yeah, there was dudes that were removed. There were dudes that were unjustly removed that decided to go that route. But the Nueva Flores was the first alternative ever, besides the Bulldogs, to the Norteño movement. Northern Riders, Sucker Frees, capital punishments, all these different dropout groups or groups that are on SNY yards or other yards. I'm not going to call them all dropout groups because there's some that they maintain they're active. I got to respect it, right? I'm not part of that life, but I will tell you this. From what history I know, the Nueva Flor, right, were the very first alternative to the Norteños before all those other groups came along and got deep, right? And the reason they got so deep where Nueva Flor isn't as deep anymore is because there's a lot of youngsters that are influenced by the way that them other groups wiggle and move on the yards, the way that the movement is what counts. And, you know, if you get to a yard and there's a gang and you're on the other side, I'm not talking about general population, on the other side, and, you know, you're from Stockton or Sacramento or Merced, and you see a gang of dudes over here from Modesto, Stockton, Sacramento, that flame in your chest is still burning for the North, meaning you could identify with dudes that were once a part of that life with you. That's where they end up leaning towards Northern Riders and different groups, because there's a lot of dudes from Sacra, Modesto, Merced, and Visalia, and all that. That's that. So that's why they go that route. A lot of dudes, some just want to be gang members. Some weren't. They didn't want to function on the general population yard because they were a little too scared. They were there was a little apprehension there. but they end up going on a yard where they're embraced because dudes have similar smut on their background, so it's all good, right? They go over there and they chill. Now with the Nueva Flor, there's rules and policies, and of course, just like any other prison group or gang, there's gonna be politics, right? And these guys don't function on SNY yards. These guys don't function on what are considered trash yards, 50 yards, or bad yards. These guys function on active yards, but they are kept segregated just like the Fresno Bulldogs. So I believe it's Salinas Valley. You have Nueva Flor that are there. There's not very many of them because, again, I don't know about the recruiting, how they recruit, the recruiting tactics. I say recruiting. I'm making words up. Fuck it. Lochin. Place the lochin in the basket. I don't know about how they recruit, but there's definitely not very many of them. And if there is, they're a slept-on group that is not talked about much, right? But they're still there. And they are on main lines, general population yards. They are just segregated, just like the Bulldogs. So in Salinas Valley, I believe you have Bulldogs and Nueva Flor that are there, okay? And they function on in the same yard, on the same tiers. Now, because they have common enemies being the North and the South, right? You could understand where they had conversations in the past, and it's like, look, homie, you scratch our back, you got dog paws, you scratch ours, okay? And there's situations where, and it's not the very first situation, because there was an incident that happened. You know, I haven't really spoken on it, and it's not I'm not in a zone or a lane to speak on it because it involves things higher than me and off my pay grade, right? But there was an incident that took place about a month ago in the visiting area. And there's a lot of different conversations being had about this incident that involved the New Flowers and the Bulldogs versus Southerners, right? There's people that saying the Southerners got off first and rushed these guys in a visiting area for whatever reason. I don't know the reasoning behind it. I don't care. It's not my business, right? But that they got off. Now, I remember in the past being in visiting rooms with Southerners in prison, and there was always no drama policy. You know, it was the convict code. Without being spoke on, everybody knew. Families, loved ones, civilians, innocent people were off limits. You didn't disrespect or mean mug or look at someone's family. You know, you didn't look at a dude's old lady too long, even though the ass cheeks were clapping when she went to go get him a Pepsi. You didn't do it. I mean, you did it, but you did it like that, right? You had to be smooth when you did it with my dead eye like that, the day. You hit him with the day, right? One eye this way and the other eye that way. You could not be disrespectful. So when I started to hear, or when I heard about, you know, the Southerners getting off on the Bulldogs and the New Flowers, and I didn't give a fuck about the reasoning behind it. Why? It didn't matter to me. Shit happens. There was probably some disrespect there. There was probably a situation where this was their only chance to get off, and they did, allegedly, right? And then there was retaliation with the Bulldogs and New Flowers getting off the next visiting, which, of course, in the gang life in prison, it's tit for tat. Motherfuckers are going to get their runbacks. It's what it is. When it's your adversary, there's a reason it's your adversary, because you're their adversary. It's respect on all sides, okay? Now, the reasoning behind this shit is no big deal, but it's just gangbanging, okay? So the New Flowers and the Bulldogs are not necessarily came together. They're not a super group. You know, they all have things in common, though. Whereas New Flowers were Norteños and still carry a lot of those idealisms in the way that they roll. The Bulldogs do, too. Nowadays, these Bulldog youngsters hate Northerners. I see them with NKs on them. I see them buster this and buster that. I see a lot of these guys are not from that old school mentality. They don't have the old school mentality. See, even me, when I was still gangbanging and doing my thing, and I knew the Bulldogs were the rivals and all that, I always had respect for them because I had the old ties to the F-14ers, right? But even more so than that, I knew they had the same professional ways that they moved and the same idealisms. Like, they hated Southerners more than Northerners. They just couldn't speak on it, right? And that was just the way it was. That's the way we were raised in the 209. That's the way, you know, the Valley, they had that Valley fucking shit going on, just like I did. It just was what it was. Merced's only an hour and some change away from Fresno. So we were all from 209. From 209 went all the way from Tulare County to Stockton. That's a fact. Biggest area code at that time. And then it got broken up to 559 and all whatever it is now. 357 now I'm hearing in Fresno. But so there's a common understanding between the Bulldogs and the New Flowers that, you know, Southerners and Norteños, active Norteños, pose a threat to them. So I could see, because they have a lot of the same ideas, that they would stick together. But it doesn't mean, because I've seen people in the past like, hey, the Bulldogs and the New Flowers are clicked up. You know, it takes a lot to click up. And to be totally honest with you, nobody in prison clicks up. Okay, there's a lot of people that say the active Norteños and the blacks are clicked up on the yards. That's a fucking lie. That's a lie. There might be situations where, hey, it's on with the Southsiders and the whites, or it's on with the natives, or it's on with the others, or whatever, and they're tripping on both groups, so both groups get off together, because why not? More numbers means more brutality in your favor, right? And the same thing goes for the Southsiders. People say, oh, they're clicked up with the whites and this and that. Every time they get off, the whites have to jump. That's a fucking lie as well, because most of the time, they're always at odds. You're going to see the Southsiders and skinheads don't see eye to eye in everything, man. They might function on the same side of the yard just like Northerners and blacks do, but it doesn't mean everything is kumbaya and tic-tac-toe. Sometimes, motherfucker, it's battle shit, and that's just a fact. So because the New Flowers and the Bulldogs have come together to get off on Southsiders in certain situations, or have been got off on in certain situations, doesn't automatically mean it's clicked up. They're clicked up. It just means, hey, they can function together with an end to hostility between the two groups, because the New Flowers are on the main line. So see, Bulldogs are tripping. Bulldog got a lot of enemies. Bulldogs will trip on the Southerners. It's a mortal enemy to them. They'll trip on the Norteños. It's a mortal enemy to them. In some cases, man, you know, because they're from Fresno, a lot of dudes have gotten into with Crips, the TRGs, the Six Deuce Diamonds, whatever, right? So they trip off that street gang shit too. Bulldogs have always had that street gang mentality. They know how to function in prison, and they do it like that, but it's always been a street gang mentality with the Bulldogs. Fresno before everything, period, right? Now, with the New Flowers, a lot of these dudes have functioned at a very high level within the Norteño movement. So the professionalism is going to definitely be there. And a lot of these guys have went at it with Bulldogs, so they don't have love for dogs like that. But there's always got to be a common understanding that, hey, there's a bigger picture. The safety and security of the groups is above all fucking hostility and bullshit. So just like you could have the North and South on the yards having an end to hostility, meaning they could function on the yard. They're definitely not clicked up. They're not together. They might play handball. They might have a day of unity. They might even sell up in certain situations and have some good conversations. But when it's crunch time and when the groups have to do their business, there's a separation there. It's just the way it is. It's the way it probably always will be until people say otherwise, right? With the Bulldogs and the Flores, it's the same shit. They're not going to all have a junta together and get together and be like, hey, we're all cool. We're all going to function. This is what we do. It's not like that. The New Flowers are their own group. Like I said, there's very few of them, but they have gained the respect over the years. They are no longer considered by many as a non-functioning group because they are in general population yards. The New Flowers are an anomaly. They're different. Okay, they are a group that has maintained their general population status. And albeit, yes, they are segregated. Yes, they are kept away from active Norteños. So I know a lot of people will say, well, that's coward shit. If they're not hey, administration puts you wherever the fuck they want to put you. Okay, the only thing I've always tripped on is how these guys identify as a New Flower. You know, do you go into the prison system letting people know that's what you are so that the cops will segregate you? Because to me, that would be considered a cowardice act. Anytime, listen up, Chitorranas, close. Anytime you go into a facility, jail, prison, I don't give a fuck what it is, placement, YA, the backyard of a rival. Anytime you go anywhere where you know there's a threat to you and you tell the cops or you ask for assistance, you're like, hey, I can't go there because I'm this or because I'm that. That's a cowardice act, no matter who you are. Facts, right? Go get your ass whooped or go whip some ass. Usually, if you're smart enough to understand the game, you go get off first at the first person eligible to get off on, right? So I don't know if the New Flowers, one of their things is they have to get to a yard and get off, and then they are identified over a fucking a visualization process or whatever. But you would think for them to get on these certain yards, the cops have to see it in their C file or they have to let them know. You know, so I don't know the process of them getting on a New Flower yard, but there definitely are New Flower yards. And yes, they do function right there with Bulldogs, and there is no beef amongst the two groups. So they're very similar. They have gang ties there. You know, but as far as, you know, active Norteños and active Southsiders and Bulldogs and New Flowers getting off, it's going to be like that. It's always going to be like that because Bulldogs are renegades. They are not adhering to no politics from any other groups. They can't. that's not the way they're built. They're built different. They are independent of all politics. And that is one of the reasons why they separated themselves from, one of the big four. As far as the New Flowers go, it goes a little bit deeper than that. They separated themselves because of the oppression, because in certain situations they felt that they were being a lot of Northerners feel the same way. They're just too scared to say it. A lot of dudes feel like they were being unjustly removed. I can tell you right now, being in Norteño is a hard thing to do in the California prison system. I know there's a lot of youngsters like, man, I'm a homie to the death. Well, you're going to find out. You might find out the death part. Make your bed wrong. Miss a movement. Let a homeboy get there that just doesn't like you for whatever reason and dirty politics on you. There's a lot of situations that could put you in a bad situation, right? So I understand where the New Flowers are coming from. They formed this group. They have their own ideas, their own ways of thinking. A lot of them still got that Norteño movement within them, that fire, but also there's a lot that are strictly against what Norteños stand for. And, they're against what they feel is the oppression and the downfall of their own people. Now, I'm not here to say Norteños don't move and conduct their business correctly, because I just seen yesterday, man, a dude I was in Y with, I follow him on TikTok, right? He probably doesn't even know it. But I was there with the Manelas. He was a solid fucking homeboy from Sacra, right? And I just seen he put out this thing talking about unity and respect amongst Norteños and no red on red and this and that. He was speaking on some real shit. But at the same time, I take it and I listen and I'm like, I know you speak the realness, bro. And I know that's the way, you were laced and that's the way you were educated. But let's be real here. That's not the way it is. The way it is a whole bunch of dudes smutting each other up and looking for any reason to blast a homeboy off the yard for whatever. So a lot of the New Flowers recognize that and know it is what it is from what it is. And a lot of Bulldogs recognize that in the past. And that's why these two groups are segregated from everyone else and stand together. Now, the shit that happened in the visiting hall, to the Southerners and active Northerners, anyone who can't function on a general population yard with them is considered trash to them. Whether you're SNY or not, you're considered garbage or not active because you're not there. And so I could see a situation where the only time they had action of getting off on each other was in the visiting hall. So a lot of the rules, the old school mentality and convict rules probably went out the window. But I've always respected the Dogs and I've always respected the Flowers, because these two groups right here, man, are on the main line. So what if they're segregated? There's a lot of people that whoop on the Dogs. You guys are only in existence because of this and that. Should go to Fresno and tell them that. You know what I'm saying? You'll get bit. My cousin got his ear bit off. They ain't playing. Anyways, with that being said, there are some super gang ties. There's a lot of similarities between Nueva Flores and the Bulldogs. And there's a lot of people right now watching this video don't even know what the New Flowers are. Like I said, they are the first group to go against, the second group after the Dogs, to go against the grain with the Norteño movement and to continue to strive as an actual prison group, a security threat group. I don't want to say a gang because that's putting 2 on the 10, but a security threat group. With that being said, thumbs up or thumbs down. Heavy's going to be the head that wears the crown. I'm going to continue to strive, struggle, and strive for what I truly believe in. And that's whooping. Let's do a super Norteño today. You ready? The gun. Bang, bang. Gunna gang. I got my own gang. It's called Gunna Gang. But we don't gang bang.